This is video 4 of my dinner with Andre, the summary. Continuing on, um, after Andre gets done telling his story about how he found himself, they had the baptism, yeah, from his workshop in Poland. Um, Wally is just stunned and just Andre says, "Oh, I have a picture. See, this was, oh yeah, this was me in the forest." And he shows the picture to Wally, and Wally's response is, "God," like in disbelief. And Andre's response was, "That's what I felt like." They laugh. "That's the state I was in." Wally, "God, yeah, I remember George told me that he had seen you around that time. He said you looked like you had come back from a war." So Wally doesn't really even understand what Andre is talking about because Andre really felt like he was God. He was christened. He was reunited with God, and Wally just thinks that he was crazy and sick and whatever. And Andre continuing here, "Yeah, I remember meeting him. He asked me a lot of friendly questions. I think I called you up too that summer, didn't I?" Wally, "I think I was out of town." So this is when they started thinking that Andre was crazy. And Andre responds, "Yeah, well, most people thought there was something wrong with me." It's interesting. Andre felt like he was God and had this tremendous experience, and everybody else thought that there was something wrong with him. They didn't say that, but I could tell that was what they thought. But you see, what I think I experienced was for the first time in my life to know what it means to be truly alive. Now, that's a very frightening because with that comes an immediate awareness of death because they go hand in hand, you know. The kind of impulse that led to Walt Whitman, that led to Leaves of Grass. You know, that feeling of being connected to everything means to also be connected to death. And that's pretty scary. But I really felt as if I were floating above the ground, not walking, you know, and I could do things. I could go out to the highway and watch lights go from red to green and think, how wonderful. Um, Something that's interesting about that is our life is limited on this earth, and you're born, live the life, and you die. And because of that, every moment of the life that you live is in this temporal world becomes immensely important. So Andre somewhat has this experience that because he can realize his death and knows that, and everybody has this realization that it is coming, that you need to live your life to the fullest. Continuing on here. And then one day in the early fall, I was out in the country walking in a field, and I suddenly heard a voice say, "Little Prince." Now, of course, The Little Prince was a book that I had always thought of as disgusting, childish, but I thought, well, you know, if a voice comes to me in a field, I mean, this was the first voice I have ever heard. Maybe I should go and read the book. Now, that same morning, I got a letter from a young woman who had been in my group in Poland, and her letter said she had written, "You have dominated me." You know, she spoke very awkward English, so she gone to the dictionary and she crossed out the word dominated and she said, "No, the correct word is tamed." And then when I went into town and bought the book and started to read it, I saw that taming was the most important word in the whole book. By the end of the book, I was in tears. I was so moved by the story, and then I went and tried to write an answer to her letter because she had written me a very long letter, but I just couldn't find the right words. So finally, I took my hand, I put it on a piece of paper, I outlined it with a pen, and wrote in the center something like, "Your heart is in my hand," something like that. And then I went over to my brother's house to swim because he lives near the country and has a pool, and he wasn't home. And I went into his library, and he had brought out an auction the collected issues of Minotaur, you know, the surrealist magazine. Oh, it's a great surrealist magazine of the 20s and 30s. and I never, I consider myself a bit of a surrealist. I had never ever seen a copy of Minotaur, and here they were, bound year after year. So at random, I picked one out, I opened it up, and there was a full page reproduction of the letter A from Tenniel's Alice in Wonderland. And I thought, well, it's been a day of coincidence, but that is not unusual that the surrealists would have been interested in Alice. And I did a play of Alice. So at random, I opened to another page, and there were four handprints. One was Andre Breton, another was Andre Durain, the third was Andre. I have it written down somewhere. It's not Malraux. It's like another of the surrealists, all A's. And the fourth was Antoine de Saint Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince. And they showed these handprints to some kind of expert without saying whose hands they belonged to. And under Exupéry's, it said he was an artist with very powerful eyes who was a tamer of wild animals. So I thought, this is incredible. And I looked back to see when the issue came out, and it came out in the newsstand May 12, 1934, and I was born during the day of May 11th, 1934. So that's what started me on Saint Exupéry's The Little Prince. Now, of course, today I think there's a very fascistic thing under The Little Prince. Well, no, I think there is a kind of SS totalitarian sentimentality in there somewhere. There's something, that takes a bite and talks with its mouth full. Oh, I'm sorry, reading out of the transcript. That masculine love of a certain kind of oily muscle. What I mean, I can't quite put my finger on it, but I can just imagine some beautiful SS man loving the Little Prince. I don't know why, but there's something wrong with it. It stinks. So that's kind of interesting, the coincidences he was having, uh, finding that book, hearing the voice, going back, and then um, the dates corresponding. And he also had this experience when he was in Poland where he was baptized. So this rebirth again of Andre.